Hey guys, Trent here. I'm here to talk to you guys about someone I find very important and very intriguing. And I didn't know much about him just a couple of weeks ago. He's a person that not many people know, and the people that do know him don't know his true story. And that's Malcolm X. Malcolm X is someone that grew up in a very hard family. His real name is Malcolm Little, and when he was very young, his father was killed on the town's trolley tracks. He was tied to them, and many people believe that it was a murder, but the police at that time decided that it was an accident, and Earl Little was found dead due to an accident, not due to anyone else. It was definitely proven many times that he was killed by a group from the KKK, and they did so because he was an outspoken Baptist minister, a black man that was not afraid to say things that people didn't want to listen to. He was a strong believer in the Back to Africa movement, and that made him a really big target. Many times his family's house was burned down. Malcolm Little was born on May 19th, 1925, and that was interesting for him because he had a really hard life at the beginning. He was born in Flint, Michigan, but they moved to Omaha, Nebraska, and his father was just trying to get away from things that were hurting the family, many times white supremacists, and that caused a lot of problems for Little when he was younger. After his father died, a few years later, his mom decided she was going to basically have a nervous breakdown, and she went mentally insane. So his mom was gone. She left basically. They took her to a mental asylum, and all of the 8 kids were split up into foster homes. So now that Malcolm's in these foster homes, he's trying to do what he can. Well, he was enrolled into a white school or a segregated school, but he was the only black person in his white school. He actually graduated in 8th grade, the top of his class, though. Many white kids said to be very respected by him, they loved him, and he was just an intelligent individual. There's no doubt about that, to graduate top in your class at a white school as a black man at that time. And everything was going awesome for Malcolm. And one day he sat down with his favorite teacher, and he was talking to his teacher about how he wanted to be a lawyer one day. And the teacher that he thought was his friend or his family member looked at him and said that being a lawyer is no job for a nigger, and that he should be looking more at things that a nigger can do. And that he told him that Malcolm X shouldn't be a lawyer, but he should be a construction worker. So at that point, Malcolm was very hurt, very hurt. So he dropped out of school. He moved out of there with his brother to Boston, and he really got into some things that really weren't a good idea. He got into gambling, drug dealing. He was a pimp for a while. He worked many jobs. He was doing things that no one would want you to do. And for a smart individual, that is not something that he was capable of, that he should be doing. He at one point got arrested, and he really didn't quite feel that he was doing something wrong until he was arrested, and he got a 10-year service for robbery, and they were gonna give him probation though. So he had 10 years but probation, and when he went to prison, he was influenced by his brother, who decided that he was gonna turn into this place called Nation of Islam, and his brother had changed into a Nation of Islam member, and Malcolm saw that, and well, in prison you got a lot of things to do, so Malcolm started reading. Malcolm was said to read many different books, but after his brother told him about the Nation of Islam, he decided to start reading about Elijah Muhammad, who was the leader of Nation of Islam at the time. And while reading about Elijah Muhammad, he loved it. He loved everything about him. He wanted to be a part of this Nation of Islam. And Malcolm decided before he even left prison, he became a Nation of Islam member. At that time, there were about 400, 500 roughly people. And it wasn't a very big thing, but he wanted to be a part of it because he thought it was awesome. Well, as soon as he got out of prison, he actually just devoted his life to this Nation of Islam. He was crazy about it. He changed from being this terrible person, this drug dealer, to doing what he thought was best for his people. He spoke for many times for the Nation of Islam and just really just started to influence the people, and the people loved him. There were some that hated him, but even the ones that hated him respected what he was saying to them. And Elijah Muhammad loved him too. He thought it was awesome what Malcolm was doing. Malcolm became the national spokesman at some point, in the part that he actually thought that if he was talking to the people, that they would listen to him. So he's getting out of prison, and instantly he's like this national spokesman for a big organization, or at that time it was small, but it would become big real soon. He took the Nation of Islam from around 400 to 500 people to around 30 to 40,000 members. 30 to 40,000 members once he started preaching to these people. He believed so in depth that he just committed his life to this. But that's the problem, is when you commit your life to something, you're never going to have that actual feeling of getting yourself better, or you're more focused on other things than you. And at that point, the Nation of Islam was his thing. He thought that was the road to the future. He thought that getting blacks' rights was through the Nation of Islam, and he really just committed his life to that. He would preach about things like how blacks should arm themselves. He said that MLK was wrong. He said that MLK needs to say that you need to have weapons, that blacks should be defending themselves with any means possible. If that means shooting a man because he's trying to hurt you, that's what they should do, because there's no reason why anyone should be stopping their rights from being made. And that's what Malcolm X preached. He preached the believings of Elijah Muhammad. I mean, he knew everything about the man. He read so much about Elijah Muhammad, it's not even real. I mean, you got a lot of times when you spend 7 years in prison. But he met his wife during this time, Betty X, in 1958. They went back to Flint, Michigan, got married, and they started to have their happy life as a family. But that wouldn't last very long, because after having a couple kids, he had some serious problems, that things were arising in the Nation of Islam that weren't his fault, but he didn't know they were going on. And he was so hard-headed about the fact that he believed of something that wasn't true. So when he found out that Elijah Muhammad had been sleeping with many of the members of Nation of Islam and seducing women, when Elijah Muhammad was the man that preached you should stay with one person. Elijah Muhammad was the one that said you should have certain characteristics that women should fulfill, or you should be with them for a certain amount of years. And Elijah Muhammad was just going against everything he preached, and he was taking advantage of the people of Nation of Islam. And at that time, he said that what he did was wrong, but he messed up big time. And that wasn't even the only problem, is that just arose some of the other problems. And at that time, Malcolm X decided that it was better for him not to be with the group. And it just really, he was heartbroken with that. I mean, can you imagine if you just put your whole life into something to realize that you were wrong, or it wasn't that you were wrong, you were just fighting for the wrong cause? It was many times said that Malcolm X was really hurt by this, and that's the reason why he had to do things that he didn't really appreciate. And I think that if you asked him today, he wouldn't say he'd change a thing about it. He would just say it was better for him to learn from it than it was from him to never do it at all. And after this fallout from the Nation of Islam, Malcolm is really hurt. He doesn't really know what to do with his life. So he does what I guess you would say a smart man would do at this point, and he decided to go on a spiritual journey, which is what he kind of needed at this point. He went to the Holy Land of Mecca in Saudi Arabia, and he really just dove himself into this Muslim Musk idea, and he really just wanted to be a part of something. And that's what many people would say, is no matter if it was good or bad, he wanted to be a part of something that changed the world. And he went to the Muslim mosque, and he started praying with these people of every color. You know, there were people from everywhere in the world here in Saudi Arabia, and he's praying with them, and they're his brothers, and he can call them his brothers, which at many times you can't do. There's no place in America that was really doing that at that time. There wasn't blacks and whites sitting there on their hands and knees in the sand, praying together. I mean, it was something that wasn't done. And Malcolm really took that in, and he ran with it. He thought that that was the future, though. He decided that he was going to start the new organization called Muslim Musk, and he started to preach not to the blacks, but he started to preach to the people. He once said that the problem of the whites and the blacks is the only way to solve it is if a white man can sit down at a table and say what he wants to say and not feel like he's going to offend the black man. And a black man can sit at that same table and say what he wants to say and not offend the white man. So around that, the end of his life, he had become a way different man than he had begun. He was no longer a man that preached for the masses of blacks. He preached for everyone. He wanted equal rights for everyone, doesn't matter who it was, and he was a much more soft-hearted man at that time. He came home, was this new man, started preaching again for his own organization. His house was burned down. I mean, it was just like a reincarnation of his father. People were hating on him. They wanted to kill him. And at the Audubon Ballroom, he encountered his last time he would go to preach for the masses. On February 21st, 1965, he was walking into the Audubon Ballroom, and he was confronted by 3 gunmen. All 3 of these gunmen were members of the Nation of Islam. And they didn't like what he was saying. They didn't like what he was preaching. They didn't like that he was against the Nation of Islam. They shot him 15 times from close range, and Malcolm was announced dead when he arrived at the hospital. It was very clear that it was about more than just what he preached at that point. It was about that he left the organization. And I think that many times that you look at Malcolm X, though, you look at the story of his life. It's like this roller coaster of crazy things. And you look at it, and he started from nothing. He built himself up to have himself fall again, and that was going to prison. And then you see him build himself up again to see it fall again when he left the Nation of Islam. And then he starts to build himself up at the end of his life, but then he gets killed. So you see this constant motion of him just, every time he gets knocked down, he gets back up, and he keeps on building this strong faith. And he had faith in humanity that they were going to figure it out. He just wanted to do it in a different way than people like Dr. King. But when you look at it at the end of the day, there's a tons of things you can learn about Malcolm X. And honestly, you're just scraping the surface now. But he's an important person, and he's a man that changed the civil rights movement because he did it from a different angle from everyone else. He did it from the hard side of things, the hard things to say. And that's just the way Malcolm X was.